Hello, we're doing lesson 2.2, and we'll start out with our first warm-up question, number 3. So basically, you want to find the slope of number 3. So first, you take your y's, 12 and 0, and you subtract them, but not yet. So just put 12 minus 0, and then you would do that over your x values, which are 0, and since the 1's already negative, it would be a positive 1, so plus 1. And that ends up being 12 over 1, which equals 12. So our m, or slope, is 12. Our learning goal is to interpret linear functions and graphs.
Marilyn sells silk-screen t-shirts for her mom at a local festival. After each festival, she returns whatever money she earns to her mom. The graph shown represents her potential earnings based on the number of t-shirts she sells. Analyze and interpret the graph. List as many facts as you can about the scenario based on what you see in the graph, and describe how they relate to the scenario. So, you can see that the graph is increasing and is linear, and it goes to the origin. So, the more shirts that she sells, the more money she'll make. So at 4 on the x, it means with 60 at the y. So when she has $60, that means she's sold 4 shirts. Interpret the meaning of the origin. The origin is at 0, 0, so it's when she has 0 money because she sold 0 shirts.
Number 3 says to write a function, E of t, to model Marilyn's potential earnings given the number of t-shirts she sells. So basically we have to figure out what E of t represents. So if E represents our t-shirts, if E represents our money and T represents our t-shirts, then it would end up being 15t, because 15 would be our E and T is our t-shirts, so that means $15 per t-shirt. Okay, so number 4. What does T and E of t represent in terms of a function and a graph? So basically we have to figure out what T and E of t means in a function and in a graph. So we'll start with doing a function. In a function, t would represent the number of t-shirts, and E of t would represent the number of t-shirts multiplied by $15 per t-shirt.
Evaluate each and interpret the meaning in terms of the equation, the graph, and the scenario. So E of 2, that means that she sold 2 shirts and made $30. E of 5, that means that she sold 5 shirts and made $75. E of 2.75, that doesn't make sense because she wouldn't sell 0.75 of a shirt, but if she were to sell that, she would make $41.25. Marilyn has a goal to earn $100 at the festival. Let's consider how to determine the number of t-shirts she needs to sell to meet her goal. To determine the number of t-shirt sales it would take to earn $100 using the function E of t equals 15t, substitute 100 for E of t and solve. Consider the worked example. Interpret the meaning of t equals 6.67. 6.67 is the amount of shirts she would need to sell to make $100, but you would round up to 7 and just make a little over $100. Why can you substitute 100 for E of t? E of t is the amount of money she makes per shirt, so if we're trying to find out how many shirts she'll need to sell to make $100, then you would replace E of t with 100. Marilyn has a goal to earn $100 at the festival. Let's consider how to determine the number of t-shirts she needs to sell to meet her goal. To determine the number of t-shirt sales it would take to earn $100 using the function E of t equals 15t, substitute 100 for E of t and solve. Consider the worked example. Interpret the meaning of t equals 6.67. 6.67 is the amount of shirts she would need to sell to make $100, but you would round up to 7 and just make a little over $100. Why can you substitute 100 for E of t? E of t is the amount of money she makes per shirt. So if we're trying to find out how many shirts she'll need to sell to make $100, then you would replace E of t with 100.
We have a worked example, so you can also use the graph to determine the number of t-shirts Marilyn needs to sell to earn $100. Our worked example says to determine the number of t-shirt sales it takes to earn $100 using your graph, you need to determine the intersection of the two lines represented by the equation 100 equals 15t. First, graph the function defined by each side of the equation, and then determine the intersection point of the two graphs. In terms of the graph, Marilyn needs to sell 6.67 t-shirts to earn $100. In terms of the context, she needs to sell 7 t-shirts. So basically, number 7, consider the equation and graphical representations. What are the limitations of using each answer questions about the number of t-shirts sold or amount of money earned? So basically what you need to do is figure out like benefits or downfalls of an equation and benefits and downfalls of doing a graph. An equation has a benefit because in an equation, always and bad in some ways, an equation will always end up providing an exact answer or decimal. So sometimes it will provide an answer to you that doesn't make sense in the context, so you'll have to round it so it does make sense. In this case scenario, you'll have to round 6.67 t-shirts to 7 because 6.67 t-shirts doesn't make any sense. In a graph, it's difficult to read an answer sometimes from a graph because if you put the point at $100, you can't really tell that it lines up with 6.67. You can't just tell that by looking at a graph. So on a graph, you'd have to assume.